How does the principle of distinction apply to explosive weapons? Imagine a battlefield where every explosion could harm more than just the intended target. This is the challenge faced when using explosive weapons in war zones. The principle of distinction is a core rule in international humanitarian law that guides how parties in conflict must behave. It requires them to tell the difference between combatants and civilians, and between military targets and civilian objects. This rule is designed to protect innocent people from harm during hostilities. When it comes to explosive weapons, especially in areas where civilians are present, the principle becomes even more important. Explosive weapons include bombs, missiles, and artillery shells, and they often have wide-area effects. This means their blast radius can cause damage for beyond the initial target. Because of this, users of these weapons must be very careful. They need to make sure they are only attacking legitimate military objectives, not civilians or their homes, schools, or hospitals. Before launching an attack with explosive weapons, military forces must identify targets that qualify as military objectives. These are objects that, by their nature, location, or use, make a meaningful contribution to military action. For example, an enemy command center or weapons depot. Once identified, the attack must be planned to avoid or minimize harm to civilians. This involves choosing the right time, type of weapon, and precise targeting methods. Even when attacking a valid military target, forces must consider proportionality. This means that the expected civilian harm should not be excessive compared to the military advantage gained. If an attack risks causing too much civilian suffering, it might be considered unlawful. Taking precautions is essential. This can include using precision-guided weapons, warning civilians before an attack, or choosing to delay the strike if civilians are nearby. Using explosive weapons in populated areas is especially risky. International humanitarian law emphasizes that such use should only happen if absolutely necessary and if the expected military gain outweighs the potential civilian harm. When civilians are present, parties have a legal obligation to do everything possible to protect them. This includes assessing the presence of civilians, avoiding attacks that could cause excessive harm, and adjusting tactics accordingly. Civilians only lose protection from attack if they directly participate in hostilities. This means if someone is actively fighting, they can be targeted. But other civilians, including those in the vicinity of a military target, must be protected from harm. In practice, applying the principle of distinction to explosive weapons involves careful planning, constant assessment of the situation, and strict adherence to rules. Failure to do so can lead to violations of international law and even war crimes. The goal is to limit civilian suffering while achieving military objectives. In summary, the principle of distinction requires that explosive weapons are used with great care. They should only be directed at military targets, and all feasible measures must be taken to avoid or reduce civilian casualties. This principle is a key part of international humanitarian law, helping to protect civilians during armed conflicts.